This is the frame repair TJ. It's been back multiple times to get work done. I replaced this section of the frame here. The center section's there on both sides. We also replaced the floor pans on this thing and the torque boxes. Some new floor pans front and back. And the new torque boxes. Anyway, the owner had a blowout with the line, brake line anyway. It blew out, lost brakes, replaced it, and couldn't get the brakes to bleed. Couldn't get like any pedal feel. They replaced the master cylinder, took it to a shop. They bled it, couldn't get anything to happen. So I brought it over here, and I think I have figured it out without even taking this thing apart. If you look in there at the caliper, you might be able to see that bleeder for it. And if you know where that bleeder is, it is below the brake line. Now, I was on some forums, and I noticed that people were saying that this could be an issue. That they fit on either side, and you can put them on upside down, and then you can't bleed it, because you're not going to get all the air out. So I think what happened is the previous owner who had this before him probably broke the line loose at the banjo fitting and bled it that way, or did something along those lines, and it's been fine. They got it good enough to drive, and he's had it, and now that he had to bleed the brakes, he's finding that it's impossible because they installed the calipers upside down. So I'm going to test that theory. Like, I'm 99% sure that's it, but I'm going to take them off, turn them around to the other side, and we'll see what we get. All right, here we are the next day. The Jeep is done. The brakes were a simple fix. Just by swapping the calipers and letting it gravity bleed, pedal was 100 times better than it was before. Before, it would go all the way to the floor, and when you got to the floor, the back would lock up. Swapped them around, it was rock hard. Still bled the front, but now it's how it should be. And it's amazing. I don't know how the previous owners were able to bleed that and get it to work, but they did. But it wasn't that simple. Had the brakes all done, had it idling, and had the four-way out, and was double checking the lug nuts before I took it back. It started running really bad, stumbling and almost dying, and then revving high and all this other stuff. And I figured it was the idle air control valve, because I had some issues with that on this before. And so I took that out and cleaned it and put it back in again, and ran worse. Checked the codes, it said TPS voltage high, and the oxygen sensors shorted. So I checked the wiring to the oxygen sensors, it showed fine. Did some more research, and they said the clock spring in the steering column could cause the TPS high voltage, and that made sense because this shows all the symptoms of that. Horn goes off randomly, airbag light's always on, cruise control doesn't work, so the clock spring's bad. I figured that was it. So I took the cover off the column, unplugged it, still ran exactly the same. So then I got upset, and I went and took the throttle body completely off this, stripped it completely down, all the sensors, cleaned everything. The two screws for the TPS were stripped, and then they snapped off when I used vice grips on, so then I had to heat the housing and was able to spin those out. I had to dig through the junk drawer and found two new screws. Anyway, I put that all back together, put it on, and it ran better, but it still had a weird idle. It's like cutting out, missing at idle. And so I decided to unplug the O2 sensor up there, and it instantly smoothed out, ran perfect. So apparently that can do it, the O2 sensor, because as soon as I plugged it back in, it started idling bad again. Unplugged it, started idling better. So it just needs 2 new O2 sensors, and it still needs the clock spring to fix all that stuff, but at least that's not what's causing it to run bad. Because it was almost undrivable. You'd try to take off in first and it'd start bucking, and it's bound to tear something up. Anyway, waiting on them to come pick this up. Now onto that thing. As you saw in the last video, it runs pretty good. Now we got the transmission in here, transfer case. You know, put that up on a stand and drop the pan. Look through it, make sure there's nothing wrong. And put a new filter in it, gasket, and get ready to throw that thing back in. And you clean up the torque converter and all that. It's just amazing. These drive shafts have the original U-joints on them because they got the straps, and they're still tight. The door shut like new. It looks rough and it's rusty, but it's not worn out like all the others we've had. Do another update soon.